Welcome to the Fight Network Studios. Cody Saftik, now joined by one of the greatest American-born Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioners. It's Rafael Lovato Jr. First question for you is that you hear a lot of the times when people are talking about your name, bringing up your name in conversation, just because of that Brazilian heritage, a lot of people associate you being from, obviously, a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner from Brazil, but born in Ohio, moved to Oklahoma when you were 8 years old. Do you really consider yourself, an American guy through and through, and use that distinction, that honor almost, that the American culture, they've, brought you as one of their own, and they really allow you to rep that flag?
Yeah, well, actually, I have no Brazilian heritage.
Not whatsoever?
Yeah, none.
So where does the name come from? Your father was a martial arts as well?
Spanish and Italian.
Right.
Yeah, my last name Lovato is Italian, and my father's side of the family is Spanish. So you can say Rafael, not Rafael. Yeah, I mean, my parents were both born in the U.S., and, America's home.
And do you find, like, even just how this interview starts, Rafael, and you hear that a lot on certain announcements or certain broadcasts, do you feel like you've got to go out of your way to almost fix that and say, listen, guys, I mean, I know that there's that culture in MMA or in Jiu-Jitsu to pronounce it like that, but it really very much is Rafael? Yeah,
100%. In fact, like within the last 5-7 years, I mean, there's still a lot of people that thought I was American, and I've had people come up to me and start speaking Portuguese to me right away. I've even had people ask me to sign like Brazilian flags, thinking that I was a Brazilian. There's nothing wrong with that. I love the Brazilian culture, but I'm very much proud to represent the U.S. and have the history that I have in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as an American.
Now, you talk about the history, and you're someone that's been involved in the sport for a very long time, but one thing that people don't know is that you're someone who's also practiced different martial arts from a young age, and in fact, boxing was one of the first influences in your career, helps you kind of get into combat sports, Jeet Kune Do, I believe, as well, before making that transition to to Jiu-Jitsu, and then eventually MMA. What was that boxing like in your early childhood?
Yeah, well, my father, he grew up in the south side of Chicago, and he was already doing traditional martial arts whenever he was younger, and that sort of led him into boxing. He kind of came from a family of fighters, and he fell in love with boxing, and then through the influence of Bruce Lee, followed the JKD path and became a Jeet Kune Do instructor. And so I grew up, always training martial arts. He was, playing around with me ever since I could move, I could walk, and boxing just kind of that became, my first sort of passion, mainly because it was something that I could compete in. There wasn't like Muay Thai and things like that, and Jiu-Jitsu wasn't what it was then. I mean, there was no Jiu-Jitsu then. And so amateur boxing fights, Golden Gloves like Smokers and things like that, was a way for me to get introduced into competition. And so I fell in love with boxing. That was my first, goal, was to pursue boxing all the way, and I wanted to try for like the Olympic team. So from around 9 years old to 12 years old, I was boxing every day and was very competitive with boxing. And then my father found Jiu-Jitsu, and I fell in love with Jiu-Jitsu, and that was all she wrote.
Yeah, you guys were making regular trips out to the Dallas area, trying to get, obviously, like you said, Jiu-Jitsu wasn't what it was. You couldn't just stay in Oklahoma and get the highest level of training, but you're a guy that branched out. So by 2007, by 2008, you're in the full swing of things. You're a black belt, you're a world champion, you're competing at the highest level. Was there a part of you that always thought, I'm going to get back to my striking roots, I'm going to go back to boxing, maybe not professional boxing, but there will be a time? Or was there really a part of your life where you thought, Jiu-Jitsu is going to be the end-all, be-all, that is going to be the martial art that I'm going to stick with, and I might not ever get a chance to maybe get back to that?
No, not at all. In fact, ever since the first UFCs, I always believed that I would be doing mixed martial arts. Just because of the nature of my history of martial arts, I mean, it was really amazing because, I had the Jeet Kune Do background, which led me into, boxing and Muay Thai training, and I got to be around these incredible martial artists. And the Jeet Kune Do mindset was always, it was mixed martial arts. Take what you can from all the different styles and create your own style, and make yourself into your perfect self-defense system. And so besides for boxing, I was doing Muay Thai, and we had a strong competition team for Jiu-Jitsu, and we were also training MMA fighters. My father was whenever I was a teenager, and of course I'm always mixing it up with them, and so I never like completely went away from doing striking and even MMA training while I was pursuing all of my goals in jiu-jitsu, and I always believed one day I would be inside the cage. I just wasn't sure when. I really wanted to make my mark in jiu-jitsu as an American. At that time, the only American world champion was BJ Penn. Right. And he won the worlds as a black belt and then went straight to MMA and went into the UFC. The only black belt matches he had were the 3 or 4 matches that he had to win the world championships.
Yep,
And so I wanted to stay in the sport, and it was my goal to be an inspiration to the other Americans, because I came from a different time where we just we're still not on the same level as the Brazilians in the sport, but obviously a lot has changed. But at that time it was way different. I mean, the worlds were still in the U.S., and you could go to the worlds, and across all belt divisions, weight and belt categories, there would be a handful of Americans that even reached the podium, second place, third place, at blue belt, purple belt, across the whole tournament. And so I wanted to stay in the sport and really make my mark and win as much as I could. I wanted to win the worlds multiple times. And so I really became, focused on that, and almost like, just tunnel vision on jiu-jitsu and trying to win the worlds multiple times. And unfortunately, I never won the gi worlds a second time. I medaled 8 times in a row. And then I was finally like, what? Now's the time. I want to change the scene and kind of re-energize myself and get re-motivated, kind of feel like a student again, and pursue a new avenue. And I'm so thankful. The reason why I'm here is to train with Mauricio Veo of Evolução Thai, and I met him and his brother, several years ago, and I felt like they were the perfect people that I needed, for the MMA training and the Muay Thai. And so everything just worked out in the right way, the right time, and have no regrets. I didn't jump into MMA so soon that I would look at jiu-jitsu and say, I wish I would have done more. I wish I, was still there competing. I still feel that a little bit now, but I'm really happy with what I've done. And, like I said, it was always the plan to be in the cage, and I've just taken it one step at a time. And, now here we are today.
Well, in 2014, you decide to make your professional MMA debut. You get a quick stoppage victory, first round submission over Kanan Grigsby. Now, he at the time was 4-0, local Oklahoma guy too, someone who had a good record, but you had no hesitation, you jumped in the fire, you got the first round finish. Then people didn't see you, a lot of MMA fans didn't see you compete for now a little over a year after that. And there was almost this idea of maybe it'll be like Braulio Estema, where he came over, he tried MMA, he clearly showed that his jiu-jitsu technique was, far superior and able to actually work in a real fundamental fight situation. You come over, you take all that year, and then you come back and you spin a house on fire. We talk about 5-0, undefeated in your professional career, all 5 wins by way of finish, including 2 by way of knockout. Your last fight, a 13-second head kick knockout over Charles Heckman, who's a guy that he actually went 4 rounds in a professional boxing match with Kimbo Slice at heavyweight. So to knock out a guy like that shows that you're improving all of these skills. When you initially take that year off, did you think to yourself, okay, I've tried MMA, I like it, I'm going to retool? Or was there a part of you that thought, you know what, you were competing in jiu-jitsu still at the time, that okay, maybe I can focus on both for a little while?
No, actually what happened was I got injured.
Okay.
At the end of 2014, very shortly after that fight, I was on the Metamoris card. I believe it was the the 3rd or 4th Metamoris, the one with Royler Gracie and Eddie Bravo.
Yeah.
And so I was really excited to be a part of that event. It was going to be in November, and sure enough, just a couple weeks before, I was training and I tore my pec tendon, that connects my chest to my shoulder, and it was a very bad injury, very painful, and I had to have my first surgery of my life at that time, and. So that was why, the main reason why I didn't fight MMA for so long. I didn't do any jiu-jitsu or anything. Obviously, I was completely out of commission. It was a tough phase, going through the recovery and the rehab and everything, and taking so much time off, not being on the mats and all that. But it was amazing how it all worked out, because it really gave me a chance to kind of reevaluate, gain a new perspective, and come back with a new motivation. And during that time, I really decided that when I came back, I really wanted to, go far in MMA, more or less. I was still kind of like exploring it, one fight at a time. But coming back, I decided that I definitely wanted to try to make a run towards winning the legacy title, and so. That was the main reason why you didn't see me fight for so long. And I was out of jiu-jitsu tournaments too, but coming back, the first thing that I did do was some jiu-jitsu events, just to kind of get my confidence back and get back in the competition arena. And that actually led me to Curitiba. I did a tournament there in Brazil, and that's where the Evolução Thai team is based in Brazil, in Curitiba, with Andre Dida. And so I did a competition there, and it was perfect because then I got to experience Curitiba and train with Dida and his team there. And then I knew, man, between Mauricio here in Toronto and Dida there in Brazil, I had the perfect team, amazing training down there. And so it was really destiny. My first competition back was that tournament in Curitiba. And then I was right back there a couple months later for a training camp for my second fight. And I've been going to Curitiba for every fight camp ever since. And also spending time with Mauricio, either here in Toronto or him coming to Oklahoma to train with me there where I live. So, everything worked out perfectly. And in fact, like I've been, saying in some interviews for some time, the injury was actually one of the best things that ever happened to me.
Like a blessing in disguise almost.
Exactly.
Well, it seems like the results are certainly there. I mean, coming back from that injury, you won the next 4 fights, you finished all those people. Like you talked about, you go out to Brazil, you meet some connections. These connections end up being vital for you. And you've been growing and you've been getting better. As we talked about this last fight, the head kick, a lot of people, they see your name, they assume, well, as soon as this fight hits the ground, but it's like you're showing some versatility and that ability to transition over it, and wherever the fight takes place, you can finish. So the question becomes, at what point do you start feeling like less of a former Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner and more of a fighter? If a random fan off the street went up to you and he said, Rafael, what do you do? What's your background? Would you say, well, I'm a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu world champion, or would you say, I'm an undefeated MMA fighter? Is there something that switches at some point, or is it always just, I'm a martial artist, a combat sports athlete?
That's exactly it right there. I'm a martial artist.
Yeah.
I've been a martial artist my whole life. I started as a martial artist. There was no jiu-jitsu whenever I was a kid. And I didn't start learning jiu-jitsu to become a jiu-jitsu world champion. When my father was learning jiu-jitsu, it was to be a complete martial artist. And so whenever I first started training jiu-jitsu, there was no thoughts of winning gold medals and winning titles and things like that. We didn't even know the world championships existed at that time. We're talking like in the years of the very first world championships ever. The very first world championship was in '96. I started training jiu-jitsu in '95, you know what I mean? So there was no thought of tournaments, it was always to be a complete martial artist. And I think that's been, like I said, during that time where I had my injury and everything, these were some of the things I was thinking about, what inspires me to be in the cage today isn't to be a fighter. It's not for money, it's not for fame or anything like that. It's to explore who I am as a martial artist. And I don't consider myself a fighter. I don't consider myself a jiu-jitsu fighter. When I'm inside the cage, I'm representing myself as a martial artist. And so I want to be a complete martial artist, obviously. I don't ever plan to go out there and just brawl with anyone, but I don't plan to ever just go out there and try to hug someone and pull them to the ground. I want to show a wide variety of skills and keep my opponents guessing a little bit.
So there's a stigma that you often hear with people. They say, well, when grapplers come over to MMA and they experience that first knockout, it just gives them that rush, that thrill. Then all of a sudden they decide, I'd like to go searching for the knockout. And we've seen with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioners that have come over to MMA in the past that sometimes that becomes their mindset to go looking for the head hunting. Do you feel like that is a real thing, or is that just a perception from the fans? And for yourself, do you feel like when you go into a fight, your bread and butter might be that grappling, but you're going to look for every opportunity available, anything that's presented to you, and search after that? Do you feel like you have to stick with your base, or do you also feel like I can create a new base, and that's part of your journey as a martial artist, is always adding new skills so you can defend yourself from whatever position?
Mm-hmm. I definitely think that that exists. Like, we've seen it before, great grapplers to get their knockout, their first knockout, and then they start, headhunting a little bit. For me, it was almost like it was weird. It was a weird feeling, that 13-second finish. I was almost like not even that happy because I trained so hard and I had so much to show, and then it was over so fast. For me, I just want to be as clean and as efficient as possible, and so everything has to set up everything else.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, obviously it's nice to get in there and get it done quick, but I can't expect for that to happen every time. And all I want to do is take the fight to where I'm strongest and, be a difficult matchup for everybody that I might fight. So, clean and as efficient as possible. If I can land some great strikes, some good combinations, awesome. I'm not necessarily looking for the knockout. If it happens naturally, great. But if I can get them, a little worried and thinking about some things on the feet and then make the takedown easier and finish on the ground, that's great too. So, the more they come at me, if I can get an early takedown, awesome. But if the takedown's not there, I need to use the Muay Thai to set things up. And now I feel more and more confident. My training is going so well. I've come a long way. And for me, the last fight was really just all reaction, all instinct. And, I didn't even think about doing what I was doing. It just happened. And so, I believe that my training is going down the perfect path. And, soon I can be a real handful for a lot of people.
Now you're approaching your 35th birthday, and I think, or 34th birthday, sorry.
That's right.
And in a lot of people's cases, I think they think to themselves, well, 34 for an MMA fighter might be a little bit later, but it's not so really the case with jiu-jitsu practitioners, because when you're coming from that wrestling base, a lot of the time it seems like your knees will start to go. If you're coming from a boxing base or a Muay Thai base, there's going to be inadvertent wear and tear. You mentioned that you never even had your first surgery till 31. When you look at a lot of the guys that are top fighters in MMA that come from jiu-jitsu, we're looking at Damian Maia. This year will turn 40. Jacare will be turning 38. Leo Santos will be turning 38. The current ONE FC champion, Hodger Gracie, 35 years old. It seems like because you're coming from grappling, you're not taking those strikes, you're not taking that damage. You're still learning, you're always progressing, but a lot of the time, you're maturing as a fighter later on in your career. About to turn 34 years old, do you feel like this is your prime? You look fantastic. You feel like you're healthy, you're in great shape. Is there something to that in not taking that early damage as a kid? You're 5-0, but a lot of guys could have 30 fights by now and be done. It's such a different mindset. What do you feel about that?
Look fantastic. That's for this right here. Huh?
That was not from a fight, though. Train hard and fight easy, right?
Yeah. No, for sure. It's different if you come up, fighting early, and by the time you're in your 30s, maybe you've been in some wars, maybe even been knocked out a few times. Who knows? For sure. So. I think the impact, of Muay Thai and MMA is very heavy, obviously. But jiu-jitsu, obviously, there's wear and tear in jiu-jitsu for sure. I've been training for competition pretty much my whole life, and so there's a lot of hard training, a lot of years of battles inside the academy. As well as battles on the mat, but I feel great right now. I'm smarter, right? As you get older, we keep training hard, but we train smarter as well. And so I understand my body, understand what is the best routine for me. That's one thing I talk about to people that aspire to be world champions or high-level competitors in whatever sport. Not only do you want to get better with your technique and your physical training and your mental training and everything, but you also want to understand your routine, your schedule. And I have a very great schedule and a really great team around me, from all the other things, all the other aspects. My strength and conditioning coach, Luke Tyree, at my home in Oklahoma, he's amazing. He really takes great care of my body, my nutrition, and I've really grown to love all the recovery aspects that are so important, that a lot of times when you're younger you completely neglect. You know what I mean? You don't do yoga or cryotherapy, stretch. Ice baths, stretch. All those other things. Have everything in place for all those things. I mean, I have a sauna and a hot tub and a massage chair just in my house, you know what I mean? So I take good care of myself because I want to be doing this for a long time, whether it's MMA or jiu-jitsu. I'm going to be competing for the rest of my life one way or another. So, you know, and just having a better head on your shoulders too, I think helps a lot. You know, that's one reason why I'm happy that I waited as long as I did to do MMA, you know, being already in my early 30s. You know, you're more mature, things in life are in a good place, you know, good relationships, and you know, you can sort of handle the stress of the fight and everything that fighting brings to you. I feel like you can handle it a lot better, you know, when you really know who you are as a person. You found yourself and know that you're doing it for the right reasons. So, you know, I feel great right now, and obviously, you know, the recovery aspects are more important. I can't fight, you know, 4 times, 5 times a year. You know, I think 2 to 3 is going to be the right amount. But right now, I don't feel like slowing down at all.
Now we talk about taking care of your body, and that allows you to be able to compete at a higher level, compete for a longer amount of time. But it seems like a lot of the things that take away from MMA fighters is not necessarily the damage, which I'm sure is part of it, but it's also the weight cut. It seems like these guys are willing to go out there, kill themselves to make the weight, and that's something that's really hindered the sport almost, so to speak. In your case, you now compete professionally at about 185 pounds, that middleweight limit, your last fight, of course, being a catchweight. But in competitive jiu-jitsu, you always range between that 88 kilograms and about as high as 100 kilograms, which for American fans would range between 195 pounds and 220 pounds. You've also obviously competed a lot in the open weight class, which was no weight class whatsoever. What made you decide when you came to MMA that you would decide to finally cut weight for a change? Not that you weren't cutting weight to begin with, but 6'3", a 77.5-inch reach, 78-inch reach, you're a big guy. What made you want to cut that extra amount of weight? And is it difficult for you?
Okay, so in jiu-jitsu, you know, there's a couple reasons why I moved around divisions so much. My brother, my number one training partner, teacher, just amazing person, Shanji Ribeiro. He's a legend of jiu-jitsu. You know, the brother of Saulo Ribeiro, who's my teacher, my sensei. You know, we've been in our primes at the same time. You know, he's right around the same age as me. And pretty much every tournament I did, especially coming up, you know, early on when we were younger, he was competing right by my side.
Same bracket.
And so, yeah, I didn't want to be in the same division as him. You know, a lot of guys would try to close out, and for me, I wanted my own gold medal, you know what I mean? And so I would move up divisions a lot, or sometimes I would cut down and go below him, just so we didn't have to be in the same division. And I had no problem moving up because, you know, in jiu-jitsu, like, it's jiu-jitsu, you know what I mean? And I feel like I can match good with the bigger guys, being that I'm so long and flexible. And coming up, I played a lot of guard. And so, you know, I didn't have to try to take down the big guys. I could pull guard, and I was comfortable, you know, using my guard to try to defeat the bigger guys. So I just competed anywhere, you know. It wasn't a big deal to me. There were some times where I would cut weight, especially for ADCC, would be more of a serious cut because their divisions were so big.
Right.
And so it was like 194 to 218, and Shanji would be in that 194 to 218 division.
Yeah.
And so I would cut down to the, you know.
You'd go below.
Yeah, I would
Okay.
go below. So I had to weigh 194. And for that, you have to weigh 194 every day, you know, the day before, the day of, and the day of the finals. So that would be some work, you know. So I already had experience cutting weight, and my coach, who I mentioned before, Lou Tyree, he would help me out a lot with that. But basically what I'm getting to is, you know, my walk around weight is around 210, you know, to 215, just depending on what time of year it is, you know.
Of course, you're on vacation.
Yeah. You know, so I'm too small for 205, so I didn't really have a choice. You know, it's got to be 185. I'd be interested in maybe a 195-pound division if that ever came about, which I've heard maybe it might.
I was going to ask you about that, yeah, absolutely.
So, you know, that might be something I think about. But right now, 185, you know, it's not fun, right? But it's doable, very doable, and I do it the right way. I mean, I've already started. You know, I'm still 6 weeks out from my next fight, and, you know, it's all diet. You know,
Yeah.
I don't try to do a bunch of water at the end, although I do quite a bit of water. I don't want I don't want to affect my performance by overdoing it with water. So basically I diet down to around 200, 198, and then the week of I cut the water, about 10 to 12 pounds of water, and it's not that bad. At the end of it, obviously I'm feeling it, but I'm still sweating, and a lot of times I've actually weighed in at 183, 184 because I'm still losing even as I even after I've already stopped being in the sauna or whatever. So it's very doable, but like I said, it's not always the funnest. It's not the funnest part, but it's kind of it's part of it. You know what I mean? It's part of the process, and it kind of gets you in that mindset, like someone's going to pay for this. You know what I mean? And so then you're feeling like, okay, once you get that recharge, you're like, all right, it's time to get in the cage.
Well, they always say it's the fight before the fight. So once you get it out of the way, you're like, okay, the hard part's done. Now I can go out there and have a little bit of fun.
Nothing is more glorious than the dinner after weighing in. That's always a good time. So.
Yeah, it just always seems so crazy. It's like, well, you're 210 pounds and he's 210 pounds. Why don't you guys just both fight at 185? It's like, why can't I just fight him at 210 pounds?
Yeah.
But anyways, final question for you, and I'll let you get on your way. Obviously, there's a big intrigue by fans. Either it's the jiu-jitsu community, it's the martial arts community, it's the MMA community. Everybody does have this interest in you. They want to see your development. They want to see you back in action. As a whole, what do you have goals and expectations for 2017? What would you like to see happen?
Well, man, it's already off to a great start. I'm really happy for this new journey that I'm on with Bellator. So I had my first fight in March with Bellator, and next fight's coming up July 14th, Bellator 181. I'm here because I'm in fight camp, training at Evolution Thai here in Toronto. You guys will be seeing me back in the cage very soon, and after that, ADCC is in September, the ADCC World Championships, which is like the Olympics of submission grappling. So I'll be happy to be there once again. My first ADCC was in 2007, so now 10 years of competing in ADCC. This will be my 6th time, and going to go for that gold one more time. And we'll see what happens at the end of the year. Depending on how the body feels and the mind feels, I might jump in the cage one more time to close out the year. We'll see what happens, but basically right now I'm just working my way up, through the Bellator middleweight division, and we'll see where it takes me. But obviously, just like in anything else, I want to climb up to the top and really show my potential and show what I can do out there.
Absolutely, there's a lot to be excited for. Rafael Lovato Jr., thanks you for taking the time, and to all the audience, thanks for tuning in.
Yeah, thank you.